Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. I'm Marilyn and my channel is Making with Marilyn. Now on today's video, I'm going to make a couple of sublimation tumblers, and these are going to be Christmas themed tumblers. I'm going to start with a couple of Hippo sublimation tumblers. I got these off of Amazon. I like this brand. There's a couple of other brands I really like, but today I'm going to use the Hippo brand. Now I'm going to use my go-to paper, and that is HTV Ront sublimation paper. I have grown to love this, and this is what I use most of the time. Now I'm going to print my images on an Epson EcoTank 15,000 printer. Now that printer wasn't designed or meant to be a sublimation printer, but instead of putting the ink in it that came with it, I put sublimation ink in it instead. Now after I print my designs, I'll cut them down to fit my tumblers. Now, not all tumblers are the same size, so you really have to measure yours to see what size they are. I'll show you how I do that during the video. So I'm going to cut my paper down on a cutting mat. I'm going to use a rotary tool to cut it. You could use a rotary tool, scissors, a guillotine cutter, whatever is your preference. I'm going to use a straight edge so I get my line straight. Then when it's time to put them in the sublimation tumbler press, I'm going to use some heat resistant gloves. Now these are heat resistant, not heat proof, so you still have to be careful. I have some sublimation tape. I really tape my tumblers up. You'll see that in a minute. And then finally, I'm going to press them today in an E-Noor sublimation tumbler press. This press came with a hat press also, but today we're just going to use it for the sublimation tumblers. Now the last thing I need to mention is some butcher paper. I like to wrap my tumblers with butcher paper just to protect the pads on the heat press. So if this is something you're interested in, stick around. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to show you some designs on Creative Fabrica. I'm going to pick two of those designs. We'll print them out and then we'll get started. Now I'm going to find my images today in Creative Fabrica. And Creative Fabrica has had an excellent deal going on where for $47 you get an entire year of access. Now it says it was extended. I don't know when that's going to end. Maybe by the time you see this it will have ended, but hopefully not. Now this catches my eye right here. These Highland cow designs, they have been so trendy and that looks really cute. So you could actually put that on a tumbler. But let me show you what I did to find my designs. In the search bar, I just typed Christmas tumbler. And notice it says it has 39,000. Now all of them aren't going to be relevant, but I just want to show you kind of a sampling of what you can find. So a lot of these are just adorable. They even have the puff or the 3D ones, the inflated ones. I thought this one was super cute, and my daughter loves pink. Now there's one I hadn't seen. That's cute too, but I have plenty of designs that I've already downloaded. But notice you can go down the rabbit hole with this. They have tons and tons and tons of awesome designs. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the process. If you find one you like, you click on it, and then because I have the all access, I can just download this for free. So I'm going to say download. And now let's open my downloads. Here it is right here. And so you have the choice of a tapered JPEG, a tapered PNG, a straight JPEG, and a straight PNG. This is the one that I would use for my skinny straight tumblers. So on my computer, I can just take it and drag it to my desktop. Now let's look at some others that I found. I can go to my profile, down to my downloads, and here's some other ones that I found. I thought this one was really, really cute. And one thing about the things that I found, most of these for beginning people doing tumblers, most of these are very, very forgiving because look how much white there is at the top and the bottom. If you're new to tumblers, getting your top and your bottom is one of the most tricky things. And so if you go with something like this with a lot of white at the top and the bottom, it can just be very forgiving. And the reason for that is a lot of people will have white spots at the top and the bottom. So if it's built into your design, that just makes it a lot easier. Now I like to do the full color wraps and they come out really nice. But today, because all the designs that I like have so much white at the top or the bottom, that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to do Farm Truck Christmas Tumbler, and then I go to my Downloads tab. Here it is, and this is skinny straight, this is tapered. I want the skinny straight. So I'm going to pull it to my desktop. Okay, that's one. Let's see, what other one do I want to do? I think for the other one, I'm going to do this Santa. My best friend's dad was Santa in a lot of Christmas parades. That's really special to her, so I think I'll do that. Look how cute that is. Now, before I actually print my design, I want to see the measurements for this tumbler because, again, not all tumblers are the same size. So make sure you check inside. This tumbler comes with the little plastic thing or the rubber thing that goes on the bottom after you sublimate it. So I want to go ahead and take that out. Now the way I like to measure mine is I like to have one of these flexible measuring tapes. And so I'm going to go around the tumbler. Now this works with straight tumblers. I pretty much only use skinny straight tumblers. So I measure around it. And you want to have that as straight as possible to get as accurate as possible measurement. And hopefully, this is a little awkward, hopefully you can see that's 9 3/8. So 3/8 would be 0.375. So I'm going to go ahead and print mine at 9.4. And then for the height, let me write that down. Then for the height, what I do is I'm putting this flat on the table, and then so that I can lift it up, I have my thumb tied against the tape. So that would be flat on the table. I'm going to lift it up, and I can see mine is a little over 8 inches tall. So I'm going to go ahead and print mine at 8.15. So when I print this out, the height is going to be 8.15, and then the width, because it has to go all the way around the tumbler, is going to be 9.4 inches. Now I'm going to go ahead and open Inkscape. Inkscape is a free design software, and it's what I use quite a bit. I've had a few people ask me just recently if I'd show how I print my tumblers, and so I'm going to show this process, but it's going to be pretty quick. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make this larger. The way I do that is I hold the shift down and hit the plus button. All right, let's move that over. Then I need to make sure this is the correct size for my paper. I'm using 8.5 by 11 paper, so I'm going to go up to File, Document Properties. Let's go ahead and change this to inches, and that's not the right size. Here's what I want right here, US letter. Okay, once I clicked on US letter, it went ahead and changed my paper size, so I can just hit the red X. Now there's two ways I can bring my document in. I can either go to File, Open, or I see one right over here on my desktop. I'm just going to drag it over. I use these default settings, so I just say OK. That's really pretty. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and lock the proportions, and I want to see this in inches. Now I'm looking at my little cheat sheet, and it said to print this at 9.4 inches wide. Because my proportions were locked, when I changed the width, it changed the height. Now the height I wanted to use was 8.15, but there is plenty at the top and the bottom that I can cut off and it's still going to look great. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now I do have to have this all on top of my paper here, my paper template, or it's not going to print. So if I printed this right now, first of all I need to mirror it before I print it, but this part of the image would be cut off because it sends it to the printer the way it sees it here. Let me just go ahead and mirror it. So I hit Object, Flip Horizontal. It's going to print out backwards, but when you put it onto your tumbler, it's going to sublimate where the truck will be facing the right. Now we're going back up to Object and Rotate. I'll move this all the way onto my paper, then I'm ready to print it. Now I don't have any of the upgraded or fancy drivers on my computer for my printers. I just have the default ones that came with them. So I'm going to say File, Print, I'm going to pick my Epson ET 15,000 series. I only look at a few things. I go to page setup and I change this to one-sided. I make sure that the color is on, and then I go to advanced and I say high quality. At this point, I'm ready to click on print. Now on my printer, I have my settings set to premium presentation matte. That's just what I like to use. For my second image, I'm going to do the exact same process. So I'll print this one, I'll print the next one, and then I'll meet you back at the table. Now, if you're new to sublimation, you might be thinking those really aren't very vibrant, and there's two things going on here. First of all, when you print sublimation prints out, they're not going to be very bright. They gain a lot of their color once you add the heat to it. So when we're done with these are definitely going to be much brighter than this. The second thing is these are both somewhat muted designs. A lot of the times I like to make really bright designs or designs with really distinct colors in them. Here's a couple I've done before. Today's tumblers just aren't going to be quite that vibrant. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and set these aside where they cannot get messed up by this next step. So the next step for me is to clean my tumblers. And I forgot to tell you in the intro that I'd be using rubbing alcohol and a paper towel. But you don't want to have your prints anywhere near this, because if this alcohol accidentally gets any overspray on the prints, it's going to ruin them. So I've moved them to a totally different table behind me. Now, all I do, and some people don't even do this step, I spray a little bit of alcohol on my paper towel and I just wipe these down. Now, alcohol dries really, really quickly. So if I set these aside while I'm trimming down my designs, they're going to be dry and ready to go. Again, some people don't even do this step, and theirs turn out beautiful as well. Now, since I have to be careful about the paper touching any alcohol, I want to make sure that this table is dry too. And in fact, I'm just going to flip that over. So at this point, I'm going to use my rotary tool. And this is one I got off the Amazon. I like it because it's pink. I think it's cute. So you push this button to make the rotary wheel go down. Press this wheel to make it back in the protected area. All right, let's go ahead and push it out. And then for some reason, I cannot find my metal ruler. That's what I prefer to use on these. But I do have this ruler. I guess these are millimeters. And it has a metal edge. So I'm going to use that instead. Now, it is really hard to see at the bottom where to cut this, because it fades from the tumbler design to white so easily. So I think I'm going to trim it at the top and then check the height before I trim any more off. That is one thing about the really vibrant tumbler prints. When you print those out, when you print the full designs out and it's edge to edge, it's really easy to see where to trim. This one, not so much. Now I want to make sure that I have all the white off the top, or you're going to see that at the top of my tumbler. And there's a little bit of white right there. So I need to take just a tiny bit more off. All right, so all that white right here has now been trimmed away. And I'm ready to trim the sides. I think I can faintly see right here and right here. I'll go ahead and start on this side. So before I trim anything off the bottom or this other side, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around my tumbler to see how big it is. Now when I wrap it, I'm actually going to turn this over. Right now I'm just checking the size. Okay, so I have a lot of extra at the top, so that's about how much I can cut off at the bottom. And then I have close to 1 inch on the side that'll come off. So I don't know if you can see this really faint ink right there. That's where I'm going to trim it. And then we'll take a little bit off the bottom. I thought I would really enjoy using these mainly white or have a lot of white in them designs, but they're kind of tricky. Now the width is actually okay because I like to have a slight overlap, but the height, if I try to put that much over my tumbler, I'm probably going to have some of those little pucker marks. So I'm going to trim a little bit more off the bottom. Not too much, just a little bit. All right, so now we're ready to start taping this. Now, before I do my actual wrapping, let's look at this one more time so you see how pretty it is. Also, so that you see it's a little bit faint here. It's going to be darker than that on the tumbler. So here's how I do my final wrap. And I used a lot of tape. If you do tumblers and you don't use this much tape and they turn out great, then keep going your way. But if you have any issues at the top, the bottom of the seam, I'm going to show you my method. I'm not saying mine is right and others are wrong. It's just what works for me. So I put my tumbler upside down on the table, and then I have my design upside down, and I wrap it around, and it doesn't really matter in this case which end goes down first. This side has a little more detail, so I'm going to put it down, and then put this one over the top of it. Now, I don't like it to be quite that close. I want this paper to overlap just a tiny bit. So I usually put my hand in there and I just kind of bounce it at the bottom to move the paper up a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean very little. So my paper ends almost exactly at the top of the tumbler, but my goal is to have it just a tiny bit above that. Okay, I can feel the paper, so I think that's good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try to hold this really tight, and I'm going to put one piece of tape right here. That's just going to act as my third hand for a minute. So I'm going to attach it to the side of paper that's on the top, and then I'm going to squeeze these papers together and then tape it down. And I want to make sure it ends at the same top and bottom. What I mean is that the two pieces of paper come together at the right place. So now I'm going to take a really long piece, and that's way too long. I'm going to attach it to the piece of paper that's on the top. Since I flipped my tumbler, now the paper that's on the top is toward me. So I have that attached down. I'm going to squeeze it together, and while I'm squeezing it together, press my tape down on the other side. Then at the top, I'm going to pull this really, really tight and tape it to the inside. Now again, that was way too much tape. You don't need that much. Let's do the same thing at the bottom. Now there's quite a bit of extra paper at the bottom. If I were doing a really bright, vivid design at the bottom, I probably would have trimmed that down just a little bit more, because that's where you get puckers. When you bend it over and you tape it down, you get puckers. I'm not concerned about on this tumbler because there is so much white at the bottom. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a long piece of tape, long enough to go around the tumbler. I'm going to start on the side that's on top. So this side is the paper that's on top. I don't want to pull against that. I want to pull with that. So I'm putting tape down, and then I'm going to pull this fairly firmly, but I'm not pulling it so tight that it makes it crinkle yet. Now I'm going to take a second piece and I'm going to go further up. With this design, this probably isn't necessary, but it's not going to hurt anything, and tape is cheap. So with the second piece, I pull it really tight so that you get that rebound effect. And by rebound effect, see how it's kind of folding over? That's what I want. Again, on this tumbler, it is probably not going to matter at all because there's not much color at the top or bottom, but I wanted to show you how I do mine. Now I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom, so I'll just speed through that. Now I like to press my paper straight over. I don't ever twist like that. I just like it to go straight over the tumbler. Now, if this tumbler had a lot of color in it at the top and the bottom, the next thing that I would do is I'd go around, I'd look for all these little puckers where your paper has to come together. And basically what happens is, as this bevels in, there's not as much surface space. And so that extra paper has to go somewhere, so it tries to fold over on itself, and that can make those puckers. So typically I would go around and I would try to smooth those out as much as possible doing something like this. Now I would do the same thing at the top, but again, this tumbler really almost has no color at the top, so I'm not too concerned about it. I'm just going to kind of rub that down. It does have some color at the top. There's more color at the top than there was at the bottom. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press on my seam here. I'm pressing on that top piece of paper. Then I'm going to go exactly where the seam is and press down. All right, we have this one done. I'm going to fast forward through this next one. Now on this next tumbler, you're going to see me struggle here in just a minute. I chopped off just a little bit too much paper right here. That's going to show up later in the video. I should have just reprinted it, but I didn't. All right, the hard part's over. To me, the cutting and the taping is the hard part. Now it's time to turn on the press. I want to go ahead and open this first, and I want to make sure the pressure is good. So before I turn it on, I'm going to put one of my tumblers in here. I'll close it up, and then I'm just going to push on the bottom side of the tumbler, make sure it doesn't shift, and it doesn't. As this heats up, what I've found is it gets even tighter. And it doesn't have to be just as tight as you can get it. You don't have to have that much pressure. Also, most tumbler instructions say that you shouldn't heat it up without a tumbler in there. So I just have this spare tumbler. I have written on the top of the box, Ali, I got it from Alibaba, preheat tumbler. So I use this over and over to preheat my machine. Now this press comes with 4 presets. You can leave them alone or you can change them for your purposes. So you turn it on over here on the side. It comes on and the number 1 is there. So this is set to my number 1 preset. I could go number 2. Number 2 is 350 for 15 seconds. That's my rhinestone setting. Preset 3 and preset 4. What I'm going to use is preset 1, and I'm going to heat it at 375 for 50 seconds. Once those 50 seconds are up, I'll rotate it 180 degrees. I'll press it for 50 more seconds, then we're done. Let me go ahead and get this preheat tumbler inside. I have my butcher paper here. I have 2 sheets of it, and I like to use this as somewhat of a paper cradle. It protects the press and it protects my hands a little bit. Because I'm right-handed and I'm going to have to rotate this, I like the opening to go to the right. Then also, I don't like to start with my seam up because I feel like if it pushes in, it could actually lift that seam a little bit. Now that could be wrong philosophy, but I like to have my seam either to the front or to the back because that's where I feel the best pressure is. It's almost up to temperature. So what I do is I just put my tumbler in here like this. I don't even wrap it all the way around. I have this lifting up so that when it's time to pull it out, it's kind of like a handle. So it's time to take the tumbler out that's in there. You are going to need a glove for this part because that tumbler is going to be extremely hot. So I'm going to take it out, and then a lot of the times I'll have a ceramic tile or something nearby. That way you don't put it on your table, you don't ruin your table. Okay, so my seam is toward the front, so it's toward me. I'm just going to slide this in, holding up on it, and pull this shut. Now with this press, once you've shut it, there's an inner button that you press, and that starts the clock. Now you want to make sure that your tumbler is somewhat centered. Right now, my tumbler is a little closer to the right end than the left end. It is well within the pad or the press, but I like to have it a little more centered than what I do. So when I rotate this, I'm going to also move it a little bit to the left. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up this pretty wide, and then you can probably see here the seam will go by, and I'm going to put it to the back. Remember, I'm moving it to the left a little bit also, so I'll hold my paper up, close it. I have to enter to get it to 50 and enter a second time for it to start counting down. Now, I don't know where my ceramic tile is, but I do have this, and that's going to protect my table. So I'll go ahead and take this one out, and I'll just set it aside while we cook the second tumbler. Now, I don't see any ink on that. It's a little bit yellow because it gets really hot. I don't see any ink on it, so I'm just going to reuse this piece of paper. Okay, let's see if I can handle that. It's still warm, but it's not going to burn me. Actually, it's kind of cold in this room. It feels pretty good. Now, the way I like to take my tape off is I like to put a little slit up here. You want to be careful you don't accidentally scratch your tumbler, and then you can just peel it off. I'll do the same thing at the bottom. Now, let me check this out. I have that long piece that's inside. Let's get that off. All right, let's see what it looks like. Oh, that is so sweet. So sweet. Now remember I said I was worried I was going to have a little white line right there? There it is. That's what happens when you don't have your paper long enough. So that is a big old mistake. But since there's so much white in the tumbler, and this is really the focus of the tumbler, I'm not selling this, so I'm not too upset with that. My daughter is still going to love this. But I just think those are really sweet colors. And then what I was saying is it's very forgiving at the top and the bottom when you have that much white because you don't have to worry about those white puckers. That was the top. Here's the bottom seam. Other than that, this looks pretty good. I'm very happy with it. So let's try tumbler number 2. Now you do want to let them cool down just a little bit, because if you shift your paper while you're taking it off and it's still so hot that it'll sublimate, then you could get some blurring. All right, are you ready to check out tumbler number 2? I sure am. I thought this was a really pretty and sweet design as well. Oh, that is really sweet. Look at that. Now this white was in the design, and then it got darker, and then it got light again. And down here, this white was in the design too. So there's nothing wrong with this bottom seam. That was part of the design. And then where's the back seam? Now with this one, because there's so much white at the back seam, again, it's super forgiving. I love that. So, so pretty. So thanks so much for joining me today while I made a couple of Christmas tumblers. I think they turned out super cute. This is not my typical design. I usually like really bright and vibrant, but these are so, so sweet. Now, I was looking at these hippo tumblers earlier online, and I was looking at Amazon, and I noticed that the 8-pack made it where they were only barely over $4 each. There might have been a coupon to get it to that, but you might check that out. And then don't let buying in bulk fool you, because the same brand on the same page, if you clicked an option where you got twice or 3 times as many, it was more than twice or 3 times the cost. So if you need more than 8, you can just pick the pack of 8 and then buy it 2 times or 3 times. Have the quantity be 2, 3, 4, whatever you need. Hopefully by the time you look at these, they're still that really low price. I think I'm going to order some more today myself. So thanks so much for joining me, and until my next video, bye-bye.